So Medicolor is on a mission to to create a more inclusive workplace, and so we're trying really hard to increase the representation of people from underrepresented groups in tech. The reason why we're doing this is we want people that are otherwise locked out of the professional networks that would help them advance their careers to get connected to experts in the field. And what we've done really is that we've put together some of the best mentors from top companies globally. And our mentors are there to guide you both as you transition into tech or you advance your career in tech. So you can have one-on-one sessions, and you can also have group sessions like this one around either specific topics or very general, where you can ask questions. You can work on any aspect of your career that you're looking to grow in tech, be it product, leadership, even design. And so our mentors are really from across the entire spectrum. So you can always find mentors that can guide you with whatever it is that you're working on. Like I said, we have sessions like this, so you can join this. So we have this one, and we have others that will be upcoming, so you can check that on our website. So that's it. I'm just gonna stop and set the stage for Jess, maybe to start by presenting yourself, and then we can ask questions.
Sure. Hello, I'm Jess Forbes, and I am currently based in Stockholm, but I'm originally from the United States, where I spent the better part of my 20-year career working in what I call product development. Gets lots of different names, and I've worn lots of different hats in the course of my career. But primarily what I've focused on is solving people's problems with technology. And I've worked in a couple of different disciplines within that, almost always through some sort of leadership position in product, what is currently called product management, design, and that's been on the spectrum of either user experience design or product design as we moved into a kind of strictly iPhone world and mobile focused world. And then also have had the pleasure, mostly because can't do anything without engineering, of working with lots of different talented engineers. Obviously, like in the early days of building products, building anything, and starting in the web days, which is where I cut my teeth in technology, you had to build things yourself. So I also have the somewhat terrible honor of being a very bad engineer myself, enough that I can do some damage and at least have a conversation with the amazing engineers and engineering leaders that I get to work with. But mostly I like to let people who are far better at that do that type of work. But like I said, I tend to want to focus on working with teams to solve problems that people have. And for the majority of my career, I have focused in one of three different sort of focus areas, not necessarily industries, but collections of focuses. And that is in content, and that's either content creation or consumption. Like, how do I get access to information? How can I enjoy it as a user? How do I, as a creator, have the opportunity to publish or produce or get my ideas or information out there? So that's content. Commerce. How do I buy things? And sometimes those different worlds intersect. And then finally, marketplaces. How do we use technology systems to facilitate exchanges between different sorts of people who want to buy or consume, and people who want to either produce or sell. So all three of those different disciplines are interrelated. I've worked at a lot of different companies from very little. My very first job in technology that I got paid for was buying domains and selling them to companies that later just decided that they needed them. Graphic design, so that was all my own hustle when I was a teenager. I started working with some folks to start a company which became the first direct-to-consumer high-speed internet company out of Seattle in the late 90s. And then moved to a number of much larger companies in the United States, a retailer called Williams-Sonoma, which had a number of different home, kind of mid to high luxury home good brands, as well as NBC Universal, where I worked on a number of different things, including early Hulu, and on the other side of the spectrum, their imprint technology kind of lead gen marketing engine that they called astrology.com. You can use astrology to gather a lot of data on people, it turns out, and that's very profitable. As well as Walmart, which is a worldwide brand operating under a number of different brands across the world. Grubhub, which is seamless in New York, a food delivery service. Spotify, and then I did some work with a healthcare brand here in Europe called Cree, if you don't have a Swedish accent. I took a leave of absence not too long ago for about 6 months, and I'll be starting as a CPO of a worldwide global tech company in early June that's based out of Copenhagen. So it's a little bit about me and the things that I do, and I'm here to answer questions and hopefully be useful to any of y'all on the call today. Is that a good intro, Victor, today?
Yeah, it was perfect. It was perfect. It was perfect. Thanks a lot, Jess.
Yeah, no worries.
So now we're just going to open up the floor to everyone. So we won't be reading out your questions. So you just you can unmute yourself and just ask any questions you have.
Yeah, and maybe since Rebecca already introduced herself, maybe Amir, you can also and Ayubi tell us where you guys at, what you do, and why are you interested in product developments? Maybe Amir?
Yeah, my name is Amir. Actually, I'm working at WindSim as an experienced software developer. WindSim is actually Norwegian-based wind farm technology-based firm. And my objective is just to generally listen to the other people perspective on area that are close to my core job responsibilities, as a solution provider. So for me, the objective is just to listen to the perspective and the experience, and if in future maybe I want to grow myself, then how I can use that experience and perspective to my advantage. So that was it.
What about you, Ayubi? Are you here?
Hi everyone. Yes, my name is Ahlam. I'm a UX designer and currently I live in Uganda.
Nice to meet you.
Nice to
meet
all of you. So yeah, we have a more of an intimate session, so you can speak up. Feel free to also show yourself if you want to. So let's do this. I guess if you have any questions already, you can unmute yourself and ask.
Yeah, maybe I have one question for you, Jessica. How did you get started with product development? Because you mentioned that you worked as well in software engineering. So how did you kind of make the switch, and why?
Yeah, I mean, in all honesty, when I started doing anything that is currently called product development, doing my own hacky, building things for the web, the early to mid 1990s. And all of that was born out of, I wanted to build things. I wanted to express myself. That's what all of the early internet was about. I want to understand, I want to share, I want to take these pixels and make them into something else. And I realized I could get paid for that. So I was raised in quite a poor background. I was raised by a single mother, and I didn't, she didn't make very much money, and I had brothers, and so I realized that I could actually free myself from that by using my own brain and creating things for other people. And in those early days, for example, making banner ads to sell to brands that were just starting to work on the internet, and then helping them code websites in very early days of being able to do anything interesting with the web. And then as I explored building bigger and better things, I realized that I would have to learn whole new languages in order to be able to do that. And so I did. That's how I got into it. Why I stuck with it is to be not flip, but just really straightforward, is I like to make things with other people. And one of the best things about the industries that we work in, if we're working in technology, is that it's a really creative act that you do collaboratively with other people who have different skills than you. And that has always been really amazing for me, because I get to learn as I'm doing, and hopefully I get to teach as I'm doing as well. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Amir, go ahead.
Yeah, my question is like, as a product developer, like if I'm in your team, then ideally, like what the KPIs are, like what are the things that you are looking for me as an experienced developer that actually help you in a way, or the overall product that we are building together, and the expectation and how best I should prepare for it, or how I should execute it so that it serves more the purpose in a way.
It's a very good question. So the answer to like what a KPI is really going to vary depending on what it is that we're working on. But generally, if I'm going to boil down to my expectations of everyone on the team, I really like working with people who are highly passionate about solving problems for people. Sometimes that's for internal teams. So there, for example, in engineering, there are lots of engineering challenges to be solved just for developers within the team, or in other kind of cross-functional teams. But typically where I like to play, and the teams I like to be with, I'm looking for folks who deeply care about an end user problem, want to understand how the solutions they're working on work for those people. So for example, one of my favorite things that I see on teams with engineers, actually anyone, is when people who are building solutions, when they're developing code or doing design or whatever it happens to be, actually want to watch users use the product. They want to see the result of the solution that they're putting out into the world, and learn from how those people are actually experiencing the product so they can continue to make it better. The other thing that I look for outside of that is for people who want to continually improve upon how it is that they're working, how they're working with other people, and how they're working on their own specific discipline. So looking for people who are curious, who are constantly pushing for self-growth. And as you become more experienced, or you have a higher level of position within the team and your impact is greater, I'm also looking for people who deeply understand the business problems that we're trying to solve. So to get back to your question around KPIs, that could be things like, what does our growth look like? Like how many people are using our product? What is our retention like? How often are people continuing to come back? What is the margin of our product? Because if you can understand that context, then you can make choices that no one has to tell you to do anything with, because you understand the problems that we're trying to solve. And I think everyone on the team is capable of doing that. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and then I have subsequent questions, like sometimes like I find it difficult to convince the product manager, even I feel maybe it's right or wrong, that these features should be included. And for me, again, I'm curious to learn your perspective, like how I can convince. And I give like 2 examples.
Yeah.
The one that, as you mentioned, like I agree, like we should be part of the user journey, like how they are using. But essentially today we have a meeting, and I asked like how we can, if we can have the recording, or we can participate as a developer or technical team. But somehow this idea didn't actually appreciate it. It could be for the right reasons. And the second example is like there is very technical product feature. We think we can like only from the data, I can tell like with statistic and data, like only 2% of our actual user are using it. So maybe we can prioritize as a medium to low term. But again, it was like not in a way accepted as it is, which could be right. But for me, it's important, like maybe there is something that like how I'm presenting those ideas, like with example and data, those sort of thing. But I'm just like wanted to listen to like how the product managers are thinking, like when these ideas that are actually they got from like somebody from the team.
Yeah, so to answer kind of both of those, I'll try. I'm gonna take your first example and say, one of the things that's really difficult for people who want to be in certain conversations or like a research session or whatever that is, and they feel like they're not given a seat at the table. I understand that feeling really well. Like I worked in design for a large portion of my career in design leadership, and in the early days, no one wanted a design leader in any conversation. Engineers didn't want them there. Business people didn't want them there for different reasons. For me, the thing that I have always tried to do, especially when I have been minoritized, I'm a white old lady, and that doesn't happen quite as much anymore, but it definitely happened earlier in my career, is I looked for my advocates. I looked for my kind of the people who can be my allies. So for example, if you are working with a designer, user experience designer, or a researcher, and that person has access to those sorts of sessions that you want to be a part of, it's much easier just to go directly to them. The product manager, the product leader is not the CEO of your team. They're not like a little Napoleon or God that you need to go through. You don't have to route everything through them. I've always tried to find ways to exercise or gain access by going horizontally into the teams that I work with, not up. And oftentimes product managers are positioned at the head of a team rather than at your level. So that's one way that I've tried to, in the past, gain access to those conversations. And for whatever reason, there are some product leaders that really struggle with the idea that the engineers that they work with are so benefited by being in those conversations. If they want to be, it expands how they understand the products that they're building and the choices that they make. It gives them autonomy. And there are some types of product leaders that are threatened by that, because then you're making choices that they don't have 100% control over. And the only solution for that is to, again, continue to work across with your counterparts in the team to gain access to those conversations. So that's that side. On the how do I sell in the idea to get prioritized? And is there anything that you can do differently in order to make that happen? The answer to that is probably yes. It's hard for me to diagnose without having seen it. But I can tell you that product leaders, product managers, even product owners are not just motivated by data, they're motivated by understanding. So while you may believe that the data that you're showing them about why this is important for them to focus on and prioritize, even if it's small, they might not understand it. They might not understand it, and even more because they're human beings, they might not want to admit that they don't understand it. And so when I start to see people, specifically when we're trying to prioritize very deeply technical problems to solve, and the product managers or even the executive team don't understand or reject the idea that it's important, I don't know, as shipping a new feature, what I try to do with the teams and what I try to advocate for senior engineers to do is to, if they can't get there by telling a story about the impact that it drives, which is really important, that's what a product manager cares about. What's at the end of the day, what's the bottom line? What does this make us in kroner, dollars, whatever your currency is? What does this drive for the business? How does this move me closer to that strategy that I'm trying to execute, or that, you know, vision that I'm trying to execute against? If they're not understanding that, then what I attempt to do, or what I like to see happen with engineers, is for you to work with the engineers on your team to take the initiative or the story or the epic or whatever it is, break it apart, and couple that more deep technical work with feature development that will move the bottom line and that is more easily understood. And I'm saying a lot of words to basically communicate the idea of take the word and work and hide it. But that's not really what it is, right? You're taking the work and you're coupling it with with other types of product development work that you're doing that they more easily understand, because they're not into the nitty-gritty of every line item of line of code that you're building. But you can take the work and ship it with things that drive impact that they do actually understand, especially if it's something small or something that can be delivered over time without any kind of like major shipping, right? Is that helpful?
She is very helpful, especially building the allies and going horizontal. I think I got that, and I never tried that. For me, it's a very nice idea, and I would try that.
Good, amazing.
Nice. Rebecca, you can go.
Hi, sorry, can you hear me?
Yeah, you're good.
Okay. I wanted to know if you could possibly walk us through like a typical day of someone working in product development, maybe from as a junior level, as well as someone at your level as well, just to kind of get an idea of the tasks that are done each day.
Okay, you want the whole span.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. So if I'm an individual contributor, I'm someone who's, and Victor, you can check me on this, if I'm contributing through design work, if I'm contributing through research or code, or I'm doing QA, I'm doing testing, I'm doing data analysis, any of these types of things. Typically what I'm going to be focused on, like on a day-to-day is, if I'm working in an agile team, so small teams that are focused on solving a similar problem together, what I'm going to be doing is checking in with them, seeing what everyone is working on so that we don't overstep one another. Those typically get called stand-ups. They're very short, hopefully, and they're hopefully with not very many people. But I'm also saying if I'm having any problems with the work that I'm doing so that other people can help me, or I can pair with someone else to solve the problem that I have. So that's an opportunity to both get help and give help to other people. I'm spending a chunk of my time in pure creation mode, hopefully. And that is, again, I'm developing a feature, I am testing a feature, I am designing a feature, I'm reviewing some kind of research and or creating a research plan. Whatever my specific discipline is, I'm in the work of actually that creation mode. I'm also typically doing some collaboration with other people. So it's very rare that on a day-to-day basis that you're going to be doing like a big workshop or some kind of like sketching session or even maybe even code review if you're an engineer. It doesn't happen every single day, but you might be doing something like that. So it could be something like doing a collaborative sticky note session to help brainstorm out either questions, problems, or solutions so that either you or someone on the team can start working on that creation work that I talked about earlier. And then depending on your culture, you're probably doing things like fika or coffee break or some kind of session where you're getting to know your coworkers, you're spending time with one another. Does that about capture it, Victor? Did I summarize the life of an IC pretty well?
Yes.
Yeah, definitely. I don't know, Rebecca, do you have like a follow-up? I can poke in another direction so Jess can.
I'd appreciate if you do that too, but I also wanted to know if there are certain challenges you experience that are difficult to deal with.
Ooh, just generally in life?
Yeah, no, just with product development, I guess, in the people you work with and.
Yeah, so I mean, I think, and you'd asked me what's the regular kind of day-to-day life for someone who's in like an executive leadership position. And a lot of that is spent around, so if you're an individual contributor and you're building software, you're building products or software, whatever you want to call it, you're in the act of product development. When you're leading teams, your teams and the organization ends up being your product. You are attempting to make the environment of work and the way people work together as rewarding and nurturing and healthy as possible so that they can do their best work and solve the problems that you're trying to solve through the strategy that you're creating. You might do some strategy creation work, and all the strategy is you take the big, amazing thing you want to solve, that big problem or question for people, and you create kind of a rough idea of how you're going to build to that place over time. That's all strategy is. And so you shouldn't have to do that too often as a product leader. If you're doing your job properly, you might want to pivot it a little bit, but basically you want to make sure that the thing that you've created, the steps that people need to take or build towards, are generally still true. So a lot of it is, how do you build great leadership teams? How do you invest back into people who are currently making products but want to eventually lead teams? How do you transform the way people work with one another? So for example, we just are currently living through one of the largest public health crises in the world in our generations, right? So how do people work differently now that we're more distributed? How do we not just say that we want a more diverse organizations and teams and people on the team who feel included, but actually make that happen and shake up and, you know, break apart, like in some cases, hundreds of years of institutional racism and sexism and other isms that prevent people from contributing to solving these problems. So it sounds like kind of big and nebulous, but a lot of it is in listening to people, understanding them, and creating plans so that everyone on the team can do their best work. So the things that I struggle with, to get back to the question that you just asked, is I like to make change. I like things to get better. That's why I build products. And I have a bias to action, which means that I'm always compelled to act first, which is beneficial if you're in a product role. It's beneficial if you're creating software and designing. But change on this scale with large organizations and change with people is very hard and very slow. And oftentimes what it is or the metaphor that I like to use is, you're engaged in kind of co-parenting large groups of people, changing the way that they think about working with one another. And people are hard. Helping people do their best work is difficult. People are messy and everyone brings their own biases and backgrounds and cultures, and kind of getting a good read on all of that kind of amazing melange of humanity so that you can do a good job by them as a leader, and also move forward the agenda that you have to solve those problems, is a tricky balancing act. But that's the thing that I like to do the best. So it's hard and it keeps me up at night and I struggle with it, especially if it's a really large work. But it's ultimately rewarding because you see people get access to work in these industries that never had it before. And they feel rewarded and can solve problems for other people who never had their problem solved before. So.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah, of course.
Anyone can go next.
Yeah, if I'm allowed to.
Yes, please.
Again, what is like your typical personal structure or framework for having challenging, difficult conversation, like, and how you make sure like the positivity remains as is, and if something goes wrong, for example, how you manage it with the person or with the product, those sort of things.
Yeah. I think that I don't know that I have one framework for engaging in difficult conversations, but generally what I attempt to do, I'm not always successful at this because I have a bad temper, but what I attempt to do is always center any collaboration, any conversation, if there's friction with any person that I'm working with, I try to center the idea that that person is a wholly different human being than I am. And that any feeling that I have in this kind of difficult conversation that I'm having with them has everything to do with me and nothing to do with them. Because I'm the one that's bringing my own background, my own energy, my own perspective to the conversation. So if I can keep that in mind, then really what becomes the most important thing to me is I want to be direct. So I want to be honest. I want to tell the truth in the situation, and I want to be kind. So if I can be conscious of what it is that I'm trying to accomplish in that conversation, I'm direct about it, not indirect, and I'm kind, then generally I've not experienced too many times where the difficult conversation has not resolved itself. Now, I used to think that I wasn't very American, and then I moved to Sweden and found out that I'm very American. And what I mean by that is the way that Americans typically communicate with one another is very blunt and upfront. You say everything up front and the other person reacts and kicks it back to you, and you go back and forth. There's a really good book which has been summarized on Business Insider, which maybe, I don't know if y'all can send out after the fact, but if you Google Business Insider communication charts, it looks at the cultural differences in a visual format of the way that different cultures generally, stereotypically, relate with one another. And that has been a really helpful thing through my career, is learning some cultural shortcuts to the way that other people that I'm talking to want to hear feedback or want to have conflict, and the way that I can adjust myself in that situation so that we can resolve in a place that we need to. Sometimes it goes off the rails because, like I said earlier, people are messy. I'm messy. Like, we all have our stuff to deal with. But when there is true conflict and it cannot be resolved, typically it's because both of us, or the group, if it's a group of people, have wildly different either goals or expectations of one another or the situation. So a really classic example is, for example, I worked in a previous position where there was a member of the leadership team who was my peer, who was in a business capacity. So he worked in a kind of a business pricing role in the company we were in, but he fancied himself a product person. He fancied himself an engineering leader, and believed that if only he was in this position that I was in, he would be able to make different choices. That's a really difficult, once I figured that out, that's a really difficult thing to resolve, because he believed that to his core. And he thought that if he had either waited, or if some kind of politic happened where he could be in my position, then he would make different choices than the ones I was making. And you can't really resolve that, but you can learn how to be decent human beings with one another so that you don't have that conflict that often. Like I said, it doesn't happen too often, but when it does happen, it's usually because you both want to sit in the same chair, or you fundamentally don't respect each other, which thankfully has not happened to me more than, I think, once in my career. And that's really difficult to resolve. I don't know if that's helpful.
Actually, it's very helpful, to be honest, and especially if I summarize, like empathy, culture awareness, maybe positive energy by, like, from yourself, even if something is going wrong.
Yeah.
Can I ask one more question, or my quota is done?
So go ahead. If anyone that wants to ask, maybe you can raise your hand so we know. But otherwise, Amiri can go ahead and ask.
I'm just curious, like, let's say from my personal level, from your side in your career, like something went wrong and you knew, like, okay, I made this mistake, or maybe something big. Then how you rectified it, and what are the lessons learned? And, that's important as well, because that's in a way we iterate in product development. So of course, like we experiment and we make mistakes and those sort of things. So for me, it's important like to listen to your perspective. Is like how to structure it and how to benefit from it in a positive way.
Yeah, I mean, I am a firm believer that you learn best from your mistakes. There's very few times where you'll learn from like a positive thing happening. I don't believe that's how people are wired. We learn the most deep lessons from the mistakes that we make. And so if we can work in cultures that celebrate that, that reflect on it so that you try to make either a slightly different mistake next time, or you make a totally different mistake. The next time you try that thing that you're doing, that's ideal. So you want a culture of reflection. Why did this thing happen? Who played what part? What did we learn from it? It's like a typical kind of retro behavior. I do that with everything. I do that with myself. I do that like if I have an argument with my kid. I do that in my life. I'm constantly examining why is it that things ended up the way that they did, and what would I do differently, and what wouldn't I do? Like if I could actually learn from this experience. But I think that as a leader, whether you're a formal leader, like in a management position, or you're on the team as an informal leader, because you're senior, or because you're just a strong person in the team, when there are mistakes, another incredibly important thing that you can do is immediately accept accountability for it, especially if you're a formal leader. So one of the things I believe very firmly is that the teams that work for me don't make mistakes. They learn things, and any problems that happen as a result of that learning, they're all mine. So I take none of the credit and I take all of the accountability. This thing happened. So for example, we broke a contract with a partner because we developed the software in a certain way. And the result of that is that we will now possibly be penalized either by a government body or by the partner company, and it will have some negative impact to our gross margin as a result. That's on me. The fact that the team didn't understand well enough to not make that mistake or to develop in a different way, that's mine. So acknowledging that the problem happened, doing a deep and thorough retro with every member of the team so that we can learn what happened and why, and what we do differently and what we take away from this experience. And then finally, I think there's something really powerful about acknowledging that verbally, apologizing for it, and then playing back both up to the people you're reporting to, but also into the organization with transparency about what you learned, what happened, and what you do differently, and that you're sorry for it if it's something within your control. Doing all of those things together helps build trust. And it seems strange, but it makes the mistake, it takes the sting out of the mistake or the problem or the failure a little bit more. And that has generally worked for me.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Great. Anyone has questions? Go ahead, Maya. You're
Hi, Jess.
muted. Okay, sorry.
Hey.
Hi, Jess. How are you? Nice to meet you. I'm sorry I joined late. I had a meeting that I was in. I didn't have a specific question, but it's just something I observed just listening to you over the last 20 minutes as I joined the call. It seems like, and just to give you a bit of background about myself, I've been in the tech industry about 20 years, but I had a product role before, a technical product manager, but that was the first official product role. I'm starting to look for product roles again. So that's a little bit of a background about me. But I just noticed in observing, just listening to you, that the way you speak tells me that it's more about leadership and how you think. Mm-hmm. As you get higher up in product roles and more senior roles, that you're worrying less about the actual output of product, like PRDs and managing roadmaps. I just noticed that it almost, listening to you almost felt like I was listening to one of the Tony Robbins management leaders. I've taken Tony Robbins. I did like their lowest course, the UPW, Unleash the Power Within. So just that's what was just an observation that I had. But I'm curious if that's the case across most of the other product leaders that you speak to or hang out with. Are these the kinds of conversations you have? It's about people, about management, about change, about leadership, about dealing with difficulty, not only in business but personally. Like, are these the kinds of conversations that you have?
It's a combination. So thank you for that. I think it's a combination. I think there's always like the beefy challenge that or the technical solution or whatever it happens to be that you're super spun up about in the moment. So to answer the question around when I'm talking to other product leaders, that changes, and that changes as the technology changes or as a new human need is discovered that we get spun up about and that we want to solve for. And in those moments, like getting the product out there and seeing a human being use it and getting that feedback and iterating on it and testing your assumptions, like that at the core is the what I consider to be product development. As a leader, you do spend, I think you should be spending a lot of your time figuring out how to make the working of the team to make that discovery as easy as possible for people, so that they're not spending all of their time in redeveloping processes over and over and over again, having kind of petty squabbles about who gets to do what in an organization. I've seen a lot of that in my career, and you probably have as well, given the length of time we've both been in this. I want the teams, and I spend a lot of time on this, as much as I want output and I want to see the products out in the world, and I want to actually make meaningful change. Honestly, none of us would be working with technology if we didn't want to do that. I want that feeling for my whole team. I don't want my team to come in at any point and be like, oh God, I have to go to another retro or whatever it happens to be. Oh God, I have to update, my shitty Jira instance 500 times today, and it's so badly configured, and I don't want to do this. And I have to go t-shirt size. And we have to do those things. Those are the mechanics of how the thing gets done. But ultimately what we're here to do is ship and then get feedback. And anything that I can do as a leader to lift off the operational overhead and the lack of effective collaboration and lack of effective communication, like I want to do that because I believe that a leader should be a servant to the people that they lead. And that's the lesson that I took away from working with Walmart for all those years, is at the core of that organization, what was good about it, there's questionable things about it, but what was great about it was this idea that you're there to lift off all of the pain from the people that are working for you so that they can do great work. They can solve problems. Doesn't mean I don't spend a ton of time updating roadmaps and making board reports and basically doing a lot of communication to people who may not necessarily understand what the teams are doing. But it's important for me that that's how I spend a lot of time. Does that answer your question?
It does, yeah. I appreciate that. And you mentioned something as well about there's a lot of noise generally across product management industry about, oh, we're spending too much time in meetings. This is a common complaint. Or we're spending too much time dealing with bad software like Jira, et cetera. This is another common complaint. So it's nice to know that you're trying to reduce the noise level of all of that.
Yeah.
And I guess like that's one of the core things that you choose to focus on. I don't suppose not all product leaders are doing that. And like in startups, there's a couple of startups that I'm applying to now. There's nobody paying attention to that noise because there's no product leader there.
Yeah.
So,
and then you don't always have to, sorry to interrupt you, you don't always have to focus on that above everything else. At different stages of companies, it's appropriate to spend more time on that than others. So like, for example, I joined Spotify, and when I left close to 5 years later, I was doing vastly different things with my day, even though I was basically doing the same job, just at different scales. Working with a team of 19 people is different than working with a team of 400, 500 people, right? So you shift your time and your focus. But to your point, there are very much product leaders who don't necessarily want to think about that at all. They want to go spend 6 months doing an in-depth machine learning course with Harvard so they can figure out how they're going to use that in service of what it is that they're doing going forward. That's interesting to me, but there are so many brilliant people currently doing that type of work. Why would I spend my time there, right? So
yeah, I had a conversation with someone who, I'm taking a product course right now, and one of the teachers, she says that she, in the last 5 years, she's run over 1,000 experiments and hasn't produced one single wireframe. I was like, whoa, that's awesome. Interesting how different environments create like there's no like single definition of product management. This is partly why, because you're a chameleon in some cases. You're kind of the glue between different teams.
Yeah, you generally are good at systems thinking, which,
Yeah.
you know, all of the different disciplines within product development are, if they, you know, focus on that. So systems thinker, you're generally pretty good at communication. You speak multiple languages, whether it's actual human languages or computer languages or different kind of disciplines. And you typically are exceedingly organized. You can set things up as part of systems, right? You can set things up such that you have tremendous bandwidth. If you have those three things generally, you can be a product leader, but there are different versions of this person, just like there are different versions of an engineer, of a designer, of a researcher.
What do you, sorry, can I dive into one more final question? I know I'm eating up all that.
Please go ahead.
What do you use to manage your personal life, to-do list? Like, what do you have anything specific that you use? I use GTD. I don't know if you've got some specific system.
No, not at all. I have a little thing called OCD.
Yeah.
No, I do have OCD, but yeah, I don't have any particular system that works super well for me.
Okay.
Yeah, it's more instinctive than anything else.
Okay, good to know. Thanks, Jess. I really appreciate your time.
Yeah, of course.
Let's see. Maybe Jess, I will just ask the last one. Let's see if we can get one real fast. So I think like as a product leader or a product manager, like part of your role is to own the product strategy. And like that's a word that is used very often. I just kind of wanted to hear your views on like what is a product strategy and what are some of the artifacts that you would expect to get to know that like, okay, we have a product strategy.
Yeah, it's the word strategy gets widely misused and abused, just like the word platform does, or like the concept of design thinking. All three of these ideas are used to mean basically they're gates in your career. Like you feel like, oh, in order for me to have this position that I want to have, I need to be able to do this thing called strategy. What does that actually mean? There's a lot written about this by people who are far smarter than me. But generally, when I'm boiling down any kind of strategy, whether it's tech, product, design, whatever it happens to be, is you have a vision, you have a thing that you're trying to accomplish. It can be transforming the supply chain for moving packages from A to B around the world, right? Or, you know, whatever that big beefy goal is. We want to go to the moon. We want to go to Mars. Maybe that's slightly fancier now. The strategy are the kind of large steps that you take along the way. First, we do this. So first we research telemetry. We understand how we're going to get there. We understand the map to the moon. The second thing we're going to do is we're going to build a rocket that takes advantage of that particular map. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to find people who are willing to do this crazy thing with us and understand who they are, so we understand how to take care of them. And the last thing we're going to do is we're going to shove the people into the rocket. We're going to go to the moon, right? So you break the steps down in concrete, but still large containers of ideas of how you get to go to Mars or the moon. That's a strategy. And so it can be simple as doing bullet points, like I just kind of did with my hands, writing it down as bullet points. But typically in an organization, other people need to understand it. And to your point, then you need to be able to have artifacts. This and how you go about this is largely going to depend on what you feel the most comfortable with when you're iterating. So for example, if you are an early stage startup, what a lot of strategies end up looking like is a product prototype. They make a prototype, you make a prototype of the thing that eventually you want to ship. And you don't build a full out thing that has solved for every little corner case or even full flows. You build something that looks like it works, that moves around, that has colors and fonts and things like that. Or if it doesn't have colors and fonts, it looks realistic enough, but typically is going to be in some kind of video or deck format. And so whatever is appropriate for your situation, whether it's a video or like a presentation, you're going to do something visual that is a narrative that tells that story. Because of the way that I think and the way that I work best, I typically start with paper. I write everything down. I'll do Post-its because I like to move ideas around to start pressure testing. Second thing that I do is I actually write a narrative. So the thing that Amazon is quite famous for of writing their briefs, or I've heard the word PRD used here, which is very old school for me, and it was exciting to hear. I'll write it down. I'll write a narrative. I will tell a story about what it is that my strategy is. I will cite the facts, the figures, and the data that I think might reinforce key points that I want to make. And then I will take it into some kind of either video or presentation format. I will do different versions of that depending on the audience, just like you do with a resume, right? Different people will hear different things from the story that you're trying to tell. But if you start with that kind of initial list of what is it that you're trying to accomplish towards what goal, it becomes much easier than to take it and cut it apart and find the different narratives that you're going to be telling with a deck or a video or a written format, or if you're speaking like I am now, to actually communicate your strategy, because what you want is people to understand. So the last step that I do is when it's all in that rough draft format of me getting my ideas out, is I like to open it up. And we work together at Spotify. You might remember, I opened it up quite widely. So I would share as widely as I humanly could when it was still really rough, so I could get lots of different people attacking and taking apart and contributing and offering suggestions. And I credit that to my designer background, because that's what you want people to do. You want people to pressure test it, to give you ideas, to give you feedback. That makes it stronger before you get it to the narrative stage. Is that helpful?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, it's a really good breakdown. All right, Jess, think we're right on time. So thanks a lot for spending this hour with us. It's been great. I think I speak for everyone. And yeah, for those of you that want to watch this again, like, we're gonna put the recordings out. So I wouldn't be surprised if you want to go back and just like check up one or two things there. So yeah, so thanks a lot, Jess. And
maybe on the recording, like just wanted to add, we haven't really communicated on that, but basically now on Mentorcaller, when the session has passed and when we have published the video on YouTube, you can like find the recording like on Mentorcaller directly, so that you can like always come back. If like Jess said something that was super interesting and you forgot, then you can just like rewatch it later. So yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
All right. Thanks, everyone.
Thank y'all for your questions.
Have a great rest of the day.